Let's uncover the biggest problem, the big miss, if you will. That difference that distinguishes the successful from the not so much. It's a growing global epidemic. Anybody? It's that P word. And no, it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. In fact, if you take a look at his focus, his work ethic, regardless of his values, beliefs, or gray matter, no one can accuse Donald J. Trump of procrastination. In other words, the only obstacle for an entrepreneur or intrapreneur who has the absolute potential to make something terrific happen is procrastination. And it can take many unusual, insidious, and difficult to spot forms. If procrastination occasionally or regularly has its claws in you, it's not your fault. Today more than ever, it's easy to be distracted. When you go back to the dawn of our history, you find an environment where procrastination simply could not exist. Our prehistoric ancestors never had to learn how to motivate themselves, overcome hesitations, or ignore distractions because as hunter-gatherers, we basically had to fight for our survival constantly. Fast forward to the first major revolution for humanity, the agrarian or agricultural revolution. We figured out how to herd those animals we used to hunt into pens, plant crops, and generally avoid having to roam around fighting for our survival. And yet again, we found ourselves in a world where procrastination couldn't exist. As early farmers, our ancestors had to engage in back-breaking labor just to survive, planting crops and tending them. Where not planting crops in the summer means dying in the winter. So again, our brains never learned how to deal with it. Then the Industrial Revolution happened and once again, everything changed. We moved from a rural farm into cities, got jobs, and worked in factories. But our work came to us on conveyor belts and most humans became cogs in big industrial system. We couldn't procrastinate on the production line or our foreman would fire us and we would starve. Again, procrastination was a non-issue. And then the technology revolution happened, suddenly in a historical sense. For most of us, and for anyone watching this video, we find ourselves in a world of almost unrecognizable abundance. So much so that even people one generation older, like our parents, can't really keep up or understand what is happening. Thanks to the technology revolution, you and I never really have to worry about food. In fact, the whole baseline about basic needs, hats off to behavioral science and one of its fathers, Maslow, he put the basics at the bottom of his hierarchy of needs. And this is the most important part. Those needs for the first time in human history are relatively disconnected from our day-to-day work. Here's what I mean by that. As entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, or self-employed people, or even white-collar employees, we can show up at work on Monday morning, for example, and do absolutely nothing for the first few hours of the day. And nothing will happen to us. No one will probably even know. You'll still get a paycheck, and everything will be fine. This is an utterly new situation for humans to be in. It's safe to say that for 99% of our grandparents, citizens of the Industrial Revolution, each and every one would get into serious trouble if they procrastinated on Monday morning. They get noticed and their basic needs would get threatened, and perhaps their jobs or livelihood would suddenly become precarious. The technology revolution has put us in this brand new place where we have the privilege of procrastination and our brains have never experienced this before. They have no idea, no strategy, no biological programming at all to know what to do with this new thing. The end result is what we could call an epidemic of procrastination. And if you want hard evidence that it's real, take a look at this. In a 2007 study called The Nature of Procrastination, psychologist Pia Steele analyzed 4 decades of data and found a sharp increase in people who identify with procrastination being, and I quote, a defining personal characteristic. The research tells us that more than half of North Americans consider themselves chronic procrastinators. And if you're an entrepreneur or intrapreneur who struggles to get the results you want, the good news is you're not alone, but rather another victim of a global problem that is occurring. Our surveying at Sincera showed the aspiring entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs are more likely than other people to struggle with procrastination. As an entrepreneur watching this, you're aware of the double-edged sword of this abundant new world we live in. We have the opportunity to do this new thing called procrastination on one side, and on the other, we have the opportunity to create, to build things, and make stuff happen. We have an opportunity in a way that other humans in our history never have. We can create or procrastinate. Procrastination popped up in two places in the history. The Roman Empire, which gives us the Latin root of the word, and the 1500s in France, where the word resurfaced in the common vernacular. What's interesting about these periods of history is that both were known for their ridiculous excesses in abundance. The French, with their spectacular wealth and lavishness enjoyed by the noble elite, had in abundance so severe and unbalanced that it resulted in a revolution. And the Romans, economic and military masters of the world, famed for orgies of depraved Cano and Epicurean success, well, you can see what I'm getting at. Aside from these two periods in history, procrastination wasn't a thing. It needs a high level of prosperity to enter our minds. It's a consequence of actually having enormous potential, but not harnessing it and doing something with it. So what do we do about it? What is the missing secret that enables superhumans' overnight success stories? How is it that a tiny fraction of entrepreneurs appear to duck all these obstacles and hit a home run? And most of all, how can you join them? At Sincera, we have discovered that the tiny fraction of extraordinary high-achieving entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs are masters of this self-regulation thing, and that people who figure out the way to cross that chasm are those who develop their minds around the fundamental advantages that make for mastery. What we found is that there are just 5 things, 5 psychological advantages that a tiny handful of entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs have, and that the rest don't. For things that if you're missing, guarantee that you'll be stuck on the wrong side of the very binary gap between the haves and the have-nots. These 5 things are empirically proven to move the dial. They're hard-hitting, no fluff, or personal development BS.